Picture this. It is April 4th, 2026. Underground ammunition depots beneath Iran's largest naval base in the Persian Gulf begin to detonate in sequence. Secondary explosions ripple for hours through a mountain reinforced with layers of concrete and steel. The smoke is visible from satellite orbit, and less than a football field away, exactly 75 meters, sits a nuclear reactor. Welcome back to World Brief Daily. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications because what happened on the night of April 4th is not just a military story. It is a geopolitical earthquake that is reshaping the balance of power in the Persian Gulf. And it will define the next chapter of the Iran crisis for years to come. We are talking about the strike on Bushehr, the hub of Iran's entire naval power in the Gulf, the backbone of Iran's Strait of Hormuz threat, the crown jewel of Iran's underground doctrine, and the location where, for the first time in modern history, military munitions detonated within 75 meters of an operational nuclear power plant. This is the full picture. Every dimension, every implication. Stay with us. Let's start with what Bushehr actually is, because if you don't understand its strategic weight, you cannot understand why this strike matters so profoundly. Bushehr Naval Base is located on the southwestern coast of Iran, directly facing the Persian Gulf. It is home to the Revolutionary Guards Navy, the IRGC-N, and serves as the main operational hub for Iran's fast attack boat fleet. But it is much more than a naval pier and a few patrol boats. Beneath the base lies a massive tunnel complex carved into the mountain itself, reinforced with multiple layers of concrete and steel. Multiple entry and exit points, emergency evacuation systems, automated ammunition transport rails, temperature and humidity control. This is not a storage warehouse. This is an engineering masterpiece designed to withstand conventional bombardment. Inside those tunnels, missile stockpiles, attack drones, assembly lines, and the rapid rearmament systems that form the logistical backbone of Iran's asymmetric warfare strategy in the Gulf. Now add the nuclear power plant. The Bushehr nuclear power plant, Iran's only operational commercial reactor, sits directly adjacent to this military complex. Built with Russian assistance and jointly operated by Iranian and Russian personnel, it powers a city of 250,000 people. Russia's state nuclear corporation, Rosatom, was so deeply integrated into this facility that it had hundreds of employees living there with their families. This is the place. This is what was struck on April 4th. According to open-source satellite imagery and assessments reviewed by military analysts following the strike, the attack targeted both surface infrastructure and underground facilities simultaneously. Craters were visible on the naval base's piers, ships, hangars, administrative buildings, and ammunition depots. The United States Central Command CENTCOM subsequently confirmed that the Shahed Mahalati naval boat yard in Bushehr, responsible for manufacturing and repairing fast attack craft, had been severely damaged. CENTCOM stated in a release that this facility represented, and we are quoting here, a significant portion of Iran's small boat production and maintenance capacity. Let that sink in. A significant portion. Not a dent, not a setback, a foundational loss. But before we go any further, we want to take a moment to thank you, our audience, for making World Brief Daily what it is. We deliver independent, deep-dive analysis on the world's most critical conflicts and turning points. If this kind of reporting matters to you, subscribe to the channel and make sure notifications are turned on. It takes 2 seconds and it ensures you never miss a breakdown like this one. Now, back to Bushehr and back to what happened underground. Here's where it becomes truly remarkable and profoundly alarming at the same time. For decades, Iran's strategic logic was built on a simple but powerful premise. You cannot win a conventional air war against a technologically superior adversary. But go deep enough underground, reinforce with enough concrete and steel, and you become untouchable. Iran state television had been broadcasting this message for years. Footage of missiles moving along automated underground rails, rows of drones and flashy tunnel corridors bathed in bright lights. The message to the world: come and strike us, we'll survive down here. Bushehr was the ultimate test of that claim. The secondary explosions that rang out for hours on April 4th tell a very different story. Open-source imagery and technical analyses indicate that underground entrances and ventilation systems were targeted with precision. The resulting chain reaction detonated ammunition stored within the depot itself. The footage shows craters and partial collapses. Iranian media claims the damage is limited, but independent satellite assessments and OSINT accounts, that's open-source intelligence for those new to the terminology, reveal a far broader scope of damage. Technical assessments are clear on one point: repairing those tunnels is not a routine infrastructure project. Mountain engineering of this scale under international sanctions without access to specialized equipment and materials is a project measured not in months, but in years. Iran built those tunnels as a shield. On April 4th, that shield cracked. And here is where we need to ask the bigger question. If the Bushehr tunnels were breached to this extent, what does that mean for Iran's other underground facilities? Natanz, Fordo, scattered missile depots across the country. These are all products of the same doctrine. Each one is different in depth, rock composition, and reinforcement level. We cannot say with certainty that what happened at Bushehr applies identically to every facility, but the precedent is now set. The assumption that underground infrastructure is untouchable has been fundamentally questioned. As assessed by analysts following the strike, advanced penetration munitions appear capable of breaching structures Iran designed specifically to withstand conventional bombardment. Tehran may now need to reassess not just a single naval base, but the foundational logic of its entire defense architecture. Now, let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is the variable that governs everything. 20% of the world's oil trade passes through that narrow strait. Every oil tanker, every LNG carrier from the Gulf to global markets squeezes through that choke point. For decades, Iran's capacity to threaten that strait was the ultimate deterrent. The power to say to the world, push us too far and we will close the tap on 20% of global oil supply. The fast attack boats, the coastal defense missiles, the mine-laying operations, the attack drones, the coordination center for all of it was Bushehr. That equation has now changed. A noticeable decline in Iranian naval patrol activity in the Persian Gulf has been observed following the April 4th strike. This does not mean Iran has lost its Hormuz card entirely. It still possesses missile capabilities. It retains presence at other bases, and its proxy forces maintain operational reach. But the largest, most organized, and most capable infrastructure supporting that threat has taken a severe blow. Iran's ability to play the Hormuz card as credibly and as rapidly as before has been fundamentally compromised. And this shift extends well beyond military assessments. Oil markets, marine insurance premiums, tanker route decisions, regional investment strategies, all of these are priced on the risk level in the Strait of Hormuz. The Bushehr attack directly rewrites that risk equation. Brent crude had already seen significant movement since the broader Iran conflict erupted on February 28, 2026, when U.S. and Israeli forces launched strikes across Iran. The April 4th attack added a new and volatile variable to that calculation: But there is another layer to this story that we cannot overlook, and it is the one that is alarming the entire world: the reactor. The Bushehr nuclear power plant was struck 4 times in the weeks surrounding the April 4th attack. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, confirmed this in a statement, saying the facility had been bombed 4 times since the war erupted and criticizing what he described as a lack of concern for nuclear safety. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, the April 4th incident involved a projectile striking close to the plant's premises, killing one member of the site's physical protection staff and causing damage to a building through shock waves and fragments. The closest impact on that night, 75 meters from the reactor. Let that number register: 75 meters. The width of a competitive swimming pool is 50 meters. You are talking about a distance shorter than the width of a soccer field between a military strike and an operational nuclear reactor containing thousands of kilograms of nuclear material. IAEA Director General Rafael Gross expressed in his official statement deep concern about the incident and explicitly stated that nuclear sites in nearby areas must never be attacked, warning that auxiliary buildings on nuclear sites may house vital safety equipment. He reiterated his call for maximum military restraint. As reported by UN News following the incident, GI stressed the paramount importance of what the IAEA calls its 7 indispensable pillars, the framework for nuclear safety in conflict zones, including maintaining the physical integrity of reactors, securing off-site power supplies, and ensuring uninterrupted communication with the regulator. The good news, and for now it is holding, is that no radiation leak has been detected. The IAEA confirmed no increase in radiation levels following the April 4th strike. Continuous monitoring is ongoing, but here is what cannot be said enough. Rosatom, the Russian state nuclear corporation that cooperates the Bushehr plant, had already begun evacuating personnel. Following the April 4th strike, Rosatom's director announced buses departing the Bushehr station. 198 people in the largest single evacuation wave. According to World Nuclear News, Rosatom described the situation clearly. "We categorically condemn what happened and call on the parties to the conflict to make every possible effort to de-escalate the situation." This is Russia, Iran's strategic partner, publicly condemning the military activity around a reactor it helped build. That is a significant signal. And Iran's foreign minister, Araghchi, drew a comparison that deserves attention. He pointed to the international outrage over Russian military activity near Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant during the Russia-Ukraine war and asked a pointed question: why is that outrage not being replicated here? The European Union, which was vocal about Zaporizhzhia, has been largely silent on Bushehr. That asymmetry is being noticed, and it is fueling a legitimate debate about nuclear safety standards in international law. The IAEA has already noted that Iran's heavy water production plant at Kandab sustained severe damage in a late March strike and is no longer operational. The enrichment center at Fordo and the conversion facility at Isfahan are being monitored. The entire constellation of Iran's declared nuclear infrastructure is now operating under the shadow of an active war. So, what does this mean for the broader regional picture? For the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, the weakening of Iran's Hormuz threat is in the short term a source of relief. A significant portion of their oil and LNG exports passes through that strait. Any reduction in Iran's ability to close it translates directly into reduced risk premiums for their economies. As UAE Chief Executive of ADNO, Sultan Al Jaber stated publicly, "What is happening in the region constitutes global economic warfare through the targeting of energy infrastructure." But the relief is complicated. These same Gulf states are exposed to radioactive fallout if the Bushehr reactor is breached. Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE all lie within the potential fallout zone of a reactor incident. Their governments are aware of this. Diplomatic channels have been activated. Iran has made clear that this is no longer just a military escalation. It is a nuclear safety emergency being presented to the international community through the IAEA. As Al Jazeera reported following the April 4th strike, Iran's Atomic Energy Organization formally asked the IAEA to condemn the attacks on Bushehr, with AEOI head Mohammad Islami writing to Director General Grossi that the attacks constitute, and these are his words, a clear violation of international law and an instance of a war crime. Iran's nuclear card has changed shape. It is no longer simply about enrichment capacity or breakout timelines. The existential risk created by the intersection of military facilities and an operational nuclear power plant is now a central variable in every diplomatic conversation about ending this conflict. The threshold of acceptable risk for all parties is approaching a hard limit. Now let's talk about Iran's proxy network. Because Bushehr was not purely a conventional military installation, it was also part of the logistical infrastructure feeding Iran's regional allies. Weapon supply chains to the Houthi in Yemen, to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to militias in Iraq. Components of that chain pass through underground storage facilities like those beneath Bushehr. The loss of stockpiles in those depots may have impacted not only Iran's own retaliatory capabilities, but its ability to transfer weapons and ammunition to its proxies. We've seen the numbers. As reported in the broader conflict timeline, Iran launched hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles at U.S. bases and regional infrastructure following the February 28 strikes. That campaign targeted Bahrain's U.S. Naval Forces Central Command headquarters, the Al Udeid base in Qatar, Camp Buehring in Kuwait, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, and others. Within the first 2 weeks of the war alone, damage to U.S. regional bases reached approximately $800 million. But Iran's retaliatory actions following the April 4th Bushehr strike were notably more limited. That contrast is being closely studied by military analysts. The hypothesis: the degradation of the underground storage infrastructure at Bushehr reduced the stockpiles available for rapid retaliation. The Houthi leadership in Yemen issued a statement of solidarity following the attack, but any changes in operational activity in the Red Sea are being watched carefully by maritime security analysts. And then there is the ceasefire picture, which is developing in real time. As reported by Al Jazeera, Iran has accepted a 2-week ceasefire with talks set to begin in Islamabad following a U.S. suspension of strikes, conditioned on Iran fully reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Foreign Minister, Araghchi, confirmed that safe passage through the waterway would be ensured for 2 weeks through coordination with the country's armed forces. On Monday, Iranian officials had rejected a proposed 45-day ceasefire, saying Iran would only negotiate a permanent end to the war with guarantees it would not be attacked again. That negotiating posture, rejecting a short-term pause while demanding permanent security guarantees, reveals exactly the strategic calculus Tehran is operating under right now. Iran knows its deterrence has been shaken. The underground doctrine has been tested and found vulnerable. The Hormuz card, while not gone, has been significantly weakened, and the nuclear power plant has been struck 4 times in 5 weeks. Iran is not in a position of strength, but it is not without leverage either. History points to 2 paths when a country's deterrence is fundamentally shaken. The first is escalation, riskier, more unpredictable moves to compensate for lost capabilities, surprise attacks via proxies, cyber operations targeting critical infrastructure, asymmetric moves that bypass conventional military logic entirely. The second path is the negotiating table, accepting military realities and seeking a diplomatic exit while some leverage remains. The fact that Iran is already talking about Islamabad already opening the strait, already conditioning negotiations on permanent guarantees, that suggests the second path is being taken, at least for now. But the situation is deeply unstable. Israel has made clear that Lebanon is not part of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire and has continued operations there. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq continue to launch drone attacks on U.S. bases. Houthi leadership is still projecting power in the Red Sea. The ceasefire is fragile, conditional, and contested. So what has been lost? Let us be precise. First, the Hormuz card. Not eliminated, but severely diminished. The largest infrastructure supporting that threat has been struck. Iran can still threaten the strait from other bases, but the organized, rapid, high-volume capability centered at Bushehr has been compromised. The calculus for any future
Hormuz threat has changed. Second, the underground doctrine. The belief that what is buried deep enough is safe has been fractured. Advanced penetration munitions have demonstrated capability against hardened underground infrastructure. This forces Thran to reassess every facility that was designed under that assumption, and that means most of its strategic military architecture. Third, the proxy supply chain. While exact figures are impossible to verify, the destruction of underground stockpiles has likely degraded Iran's ability to arm and resupply its regional proxies at previous rates. The operational tempo of those proxy forces in coming weeks will tell much of the story. Fourth, and perhaps most consequentially for diplomacy, the nuclear safety issue has been elevated to the top of the international agenda. The risk of a radiological release from Bushehr is now a global concern, not a regional one. The IAEA, the UN Security Council, Russia, and every Gulf state are watching the reactor. That gives Iran a form of leverage it did not choose but now possesses. The ability to frame continued military escalation as a threat not just to Iran, but to the entire Gulf and to the global non-proliferation order. And there is one more dimension that deserves attention: time. Before April 2026, Iran could reasonably believe it had the capacity and the time to rebuild its military presence in the Gulf. Sanctions slow things down, but time and engineering can overcome a great deal. That luxury appears to have been removed. The underground tunnel complex at Bushehr would take years to rebuild under optimal conditions. Under current sanction levels with limited access to mountain engineering equipment and specialized materials, the timeline extends further. The window for Iran to restore its pre-war naval posture in the Gulf, if it ever reopens, is measured in years, not months. The regional balance is shifting not just militarily, economically, diplomatically, in terms of nuclear safety, in terms of international law. The Bushehr strike has opened questions that will not close quickly, regardless of whether the ceasefire in Islamabad holds or collapses. Will Iran ultimately choose escalation or diplomacy? The Islamabad talks suggest tentatively that negotiation is on the table, but Iran has entered those talks from a position of damaged deterrence rather than confident strength. How Thran navigates that gap between its remaining leverage and its diminished capability will determine whether the Gulf sees de-escalation or a next wave of confrontation. What is certain is this: the doctrine of underground invincibility,
the centerpiece of Iranian strategic planning for decades, has been placed under serious question. Bushehr was the most visible, most dramatic, most consequential test of that doctrine. And on April 4, 2026, the secondary explosions that echoed for hours through those mountain tunnels may have been the sound of a strategic era coming to an end. We will of course keep you updated as the Islamabad talks develop and as the IAEA continues its monitoring of Bushehr and Iran's other nuclear sites. This story is not over, not even close. If this analysis gave you a clearer picture of one of the most complex and consequential conflicts of our time, then you already know what to do. Subscribe to World Brief Daily. Turn on your notifications and stay with us because the next chapter of this story is already being written. Thanks for watching.